It takes just 2 cells to make a human being. 2 cells and a miracle. In 9 months, the pair of cells blossoms into billions. Where once was nothing, now grows a tiny human, gently nestled and protected in mother's womb. Together, mother and child share this odyssey of life, nurturing, and rapid change. A magnificent adventure called pregnancy.
Okay, Mommy's gonna make sure.
Each of us is unique, and yet every one of us is more alike than we might imagine. Our chromosomes and genes are almost identical. And we all got here in much the same way, voyagers on the same miraculous journey as our cells became ourselves. This is a story of that journey. It's about the bond between mother and child. A bond that starts invisibly from the moment of conception. From the very first moment, when 2 tiny cells begin to transform into a new person, the mother's body starts to reshape and remodel itself. She becomes perfectly suited for carrying the most precious cargo imaginable, the fragile beginning of life itself. Reproduction is both exquisite and exquisitely common, perfect in its design. It begins the instant 400 million sperm launch against the cervix, the entrance to the woman's reproductive system. Each is programmed to seek out the egg and fertilize it. It's a risky mission. Many sperm perish in the acidic climate of the vagina. The strongest make their way through the cervix to start their marathon. The sperm must swim the equivalent of 9 miles through hostile waters to reach the egg.
Out of 200 to 400 million sperm, only a few make it to the egg itself, and it does so by whipping its tail.
Vigorous, but also desperate and doomed, most get lost in the folds of the uterus or follow the wrong fallopian tube where no egg exists. The remaining sperm race toward their target, and only one can fertilize the egg. The egg is one of the biggest cells in the human body. Of the hundreds of millions of sperm, mere hundreds find it. They surround the egg, each trying to burrow its way in. The instant one sperm penetrates the zona pellucida, or eggshell, the exterior closes and the race is over. All other sperm are shut out. The egg is sealed, and so is the fate of the person who will grow from it. The fertilized egg now has all the genetic information it needs to create new life. A glorious chain reaction has begun. Like the embrace that began the process, the nucleus of the egg and sperm join inside the egg nearly a day later. Together, they create the very blueprint from which a new person will be made.
You've got 23 chromosomes from your father, and you've got 23 chromosomes from your mother.
Inside the nucleus of the egg and sperm is a pronucleus, a capsule containing the 23 chromosomes on which the DNA code is written.
Those two pronuclei will come close together in that position. The chromosomes in each will have doubled, so you've got 46 in each. The pronuclei will dissolve. Those chromosomes come together, and they're then pulled apart. And the cell then divides, and you've got a two-cell embryo.
Only 2 cells, and yet the future baby's sex, looks, even potential health problems are already determined. This tiny speck is pushed by finger-like cilia through the fallopian tube toward the uterus. On the long journey, it divides again and again. At 32 cells, this cluster begins its transformation. The cells divide into distinct types, one type destined to become the baby, the other its supporting organ, the placenta. The cells continue to feverishly multiply, unnoticed by the mother. In 6 days, one cell has bloomed to nearly 200, and the embryo has outgrown its protective bubble. Like a flower bursting from its bud, it emerges and expands, burrowing into the soft, warm folds of mother's uterus. In a matter of days, cells become structures, building a human framework. Among the first is the neural tube, which in short time will become the brain and the spine.
It's at this stage that the cells on the back of the embryo will start rising, will form a tube and actually come together at the top of that tube and fuse. And this all begins at the midpoint of the back, and it'll proceed in a zipper-like fashion from the midpoint towards the head and towards the tail.
By the end of the 3rd week comes another milestone. The head and the tail portion of the tube fuse completely. A brain starts to form. The tail, a dramatic reminder of our primordial past, eventually fades away. Everything about the young embryo is primitive. Until the placenta develops, a yolk sac provides nourishment for the first weeks.
If you were to look at a 3.5-week-old embryo, it would be very difficult to look at it and say, this is a human. It may look like the same thing as a mouse embryo or a pig embryo. They all look very similar.
By 4 weeks, the human resemblance is not much clearer, but mother and child are already communing. The embryo sends chemical signals, and the mother's body prepares to nurture, forging an unbreakable lifetime bond. By the end of the 4th week, the mother might suspect she's pregnant. To the outside world, there's no sign of the changes within. Proteins secreted by the developing placenta tell the mother's body to stop releasing eggs and prevent the uterine lining from shedding. The embryo's fragile world inside the uterus is now secure. By the 5th week comes a glorious explosion of life force. Within the watery, amniotic, fluid-filled cocoon, the embryo grows more than 1 million new cells every minute. Each of these cells has a job to do.
A critical point during embryogenesis is the point at which all of the organs are signaled to begin developing. The genes that all have to be turned on at that point all have to be done like a well-conducted orchestra.
The heart is the organ that develops first. The cells destined to become heart cells begin their first erratic flutters soon after the egg implanted in the uterus. By 4.5 weeks, those cells are forming the structure of the heart. In another few weeks, beating inside this embryo will be a fully functioning heart. It is disproportionately large right now, but the rest of the tissues and organs will soon catch up. Not long after the heart begins to develop, the liver starts growing. Soon it is more than 10% of the embryo's size. From eyes to limbs, ears to lungs, all of the embryo's organs take shape, cell by delicate cell. Each system takes its cue from nature's strict and graceful choreography. Each organ makes its entrance at just the right moment to assure the baby's health. Just like the constant beat of this little heart, the pace is quick and unstoppable. Even from day to day, these amazing changes are unmistakable. The yolk sac, no longer needed for nourishment, finds a new role as the embryo's blood cell factory. It is firmly tethered to the amniotic sac. Weighing less than half an ounce, the growing embryo is already independent, with a circulatory system that's separate from the mother's. The placenta keeps the two bloodstreams apart. The placenta also feeds the embryo with nutrients it extracts from the mother's blood and rids the embryo's environment of waste. The umbilical cord links the embryo to the placenta, the lifeline between mother and child. At less than half an inch long and 6 weeks old, tiny limb buds begin to emerge.
They start as a protrusion, 2 on the upper portion of the embryo and 2 in the lower portion of the embryo. The cells on top will tell the cells on the bottom to divide, grow, and they start pushing the limb buds outwards. This keeps happening for another 4 or 5 days, and at that point you'll have little paddles on the end of those buds that will look like little hands and little feet.
The transparent skin reveals everything inside this tiny body. Dark pits appear where eyes will soon develop. Not more than 7 weeks old, the embryo looks more human with each passing day. And with each day, the mother's body makes remarkable adaptations of its own.
I just can't wait till my stomach starts getting bigger. Like right now, you can't even tell that I'm pregnant, and like I can't wait till I start feeling the baby move and kick and all that good stuff.
Hi, congratulations, Brenda. I'm Dr. Abraham here.
Brenda and her husband are expecting their first baby.
Your first OB visit.
She feels ready for the changes, even the unexpected ones.
Okay, Brenda, let's go over some more details here. I'm going to let you know some of the things that you're going to expect and give you a chance to ask, both of you, give you a chance to ask me some questions, okay?
I didn't expect to get anything because my mom really didn't have any morning sickness, and neither did my sister. So I thought I'd be the lucky one also and not get it.
Increase of progesterone and estrogen hormones cause morning sickness. Usually about 70-80% of women during early pregnancy, even starting as early as 4 to 8 weeks, begin noticing nausea. That's actually a very good sign to me. That shows that usually the progesterone hormones are increasing normally, and her pregnancy is most likely very protected. Let me tell you the most.
The obstetrician, a prospective mom's guide in pregnancy, does her best to alleviate fears and answer questions.
How are you doing right now with that?
It's okay some days. Some days are pretty bad and some days are fine.
Okay, all right. You want to make sure your stomach does not get empty. When you get an empty stomach, the acid will start building up, and that can cause a little more of the nausea and the heartburn. Start way up in the underarm, and I usually
Brenda's breasts are becoming more tender as they grow fuller.
once a month, about a week after your period. Some of the changes in the breast that occurred during the beginning of pregnancy and that continued during the rest of the pregnancy are increased growth of the actual cells of the breast. and this is very early. The glandular as well as the ductal cells, they're growing in number and they actually expand, getting ready to fill with milk, which will happen right after delivery. Okay, all right.
At 8 weeks into her pregnancy, Brenda's body is transforming into the perfect life-giving vessel. Her uterus is undergoing the biggest changes and is enlarging and softening to accommodate its flourishing embryo.
I can actually deep inside feel the top of your uterus. The individual uterine muscle cells are increasing in size as well as increasing in number. They increase in size all the way through the beginning of pregnancy till delivery. But initially what happens is the size of the uterus grows from starts as the size of my fist and even smaller in some people, and it increases to the size of a large orange or grapefruit, cantaloupe, and then of course a small watermelon. What happens around between 9 and 12 weeks is that it actually goes from a pelvic organ to an abdominal organ.
Discomfort has always been the handmaiden of early pregnancy. Though it signals to Brenda that there's new life inside her, she has not seen any actual evidence of it until today. Through ultrasound, Brenda and her husband meet their child for the very first time.
It's a pretty good picture, guys. Oh, the baby looks wonderful. Look at that little heartbeat. Can you guys see it? Okay. Here we go. Move this. This is the baby right in here. The head is on this end. Bottom's down here. Right in the center is this little thing flickering away really fast. That's the heart. Can you see that?
That's
Frank, can you see? Okay.
It's right in the middle.
Stick your head around.
Do you see it, like the movement? That's the heartbeat.
Okay, what it looks like with the measurement, the baby's about 3 centimeters, just like the length of a peanut. Okay, your little peanut here. Okay. We don't have fingers and things right now, but they're called arms.
For Brenda, the concept of motherhood is no longer abstract. At only 8 weeks, the embryo looks like a miniature baby, her baby.
At 8 weeks of development, the embryo will look much like a very, very tiny human, not more than 5 or so millimeters in size. It's very tiny. The head will have eyes. It will have little tiny, what appear to be ears. It will have arms. It will have legs. You see the body of the embryo, and the back of the embryo looks much like a small, tiny baby that could be, born at that stage. But it's of course, much too small and underdeveloped to survive outside of the womb.
The limb buds that appeared a few weeks ago are turning into actual limbs with tiny fingers and toes. Every day brings staggering, noticeable changes to the embryo. Though just over an inch long, most of the major organs are already formed. Staring blindly into their watery universe, the embryo's eyes continue to form as the face takes shape. The lens, optic nerve, and cornea are in place, and the iris forms over the lens. Small folds of skin, the eyelids, complete the intricate structure. Between 8 and 10 weeks after conception, the lids close. For the next 5 months, the eyes will mature enough to take in the world. The brain grows enormously. 100,000 new nerve cells are created every minute, forming this organ of unrivaled complexity. Now, this tiny embryo makes a monumental transition. It graduates from embryo, the developing phase, to fetus, the growing and maturing phase. It won't be long before it is able to move, to swim in its liquid cocoon. As the fetus grows more complex, the mother must adapt to fill its growing needs. The placenta is the fetus's life source, supplying nutrients from the mother's blood. The mother's heart must work extra hard to pump the increased volume of blood through her system, so anything she does to keep her heart healthy will keep her fetus healthy too. Walking is good exercise, keeping the supply of blood to the placenta rich and plentiful. Eating right throughout pregnancy is also essential for mother and child's well-being. The fetus depends on mother's diet to supply the raw materials for healthy growth, and for her own health, the mother can't afford to skimp on vitamins and minerals. When it comes to nutrition, rule number 1 is what's good for the mother is good for her developing child. And what the mother eats, her fetus eats.
The requirements of the body increase as far as calories are concerned. About 300 extra calories a day, 300 to 500 extra calories a day, all throughout pregnancy. If you have a more healthy, balanced diet and intake, there's decreased problems in development.
What harms the mother doubly harms the fragile fetus.
Tobacco is extremely dangerous to both mother and fetus. It can affect the mother's cardiovascular system and the blood vessels and how efficiently the heart is pumping. It actually affects the fetus as well and causes a lot of low birth weight babies.
A pregnant mother never drinks alone. She shares any alcohol she consumes with her fetus. When consumed in excess, especially during the early crucial stages, alcohol can stunt the fetal development. The placenta is like a fine mesh fabric. Virtually any chemical can pass through if it's small enough. When the mother smokes and drinks, nicotine, carbon monoxide, and alcohol glide through the placental barrier to taint the fetal bloodstream, slowing the development of the fetus's brain, eyes, and respiratory system. Mothering begins long before birth, as the mother-to-be creates a healthy environment.
At the beginning, I was really happy, and then I went through a period where I was scared, and I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm doing this. But then I realized that, I am doing it, so you can't be scared. You just gotta, I've read a lot of it, researched and stuff like that, so it kind of put me at ease.
At the end of the 3rd month of pregnancy, the mother's body finally begins to reflect the remarkable changes inside. A little more than 16 weeks into her pregnancy, Minnie is anxious to learn if her baby will be a boy or a girl. Sex is determined at the moment of conception, but it takes nearly 20 weeks before it can be recognized.
I am guessing that it's going to be a boy. I just have a feeling, but for my daughter's sake, and I love her dearly, I hope it's a girl. It's just like a gut feeling, a big gut feeling.
This tiny fetus, nestled deep inside mom's womb, continues its transformation. It's just 3.5 inches long, but there's no mistaking that it's human. The tiny face of this fetus looks as if in deep slumber. The arms are long enough to grasp each other, and the legs are outstretched. The skin has become less transparent, with only blood vessels visible, and the fetus finally reveals its gender.
Here we can actually see as the baby allows us to, as we move.
Minnie and her family have looked forward to this day for nearly 20 weeks. Today, they'll learn the sex of their baby.
With the head at this end, and the chest and the heart moving towards the feet, and then eventually we get to the thigh bone.
Months of anticipation are about to end.
Let's take a look here, and this one's fairly obvious. So do we want to know what the sex is?
Yes.
Okay.
The male and female sexual organs start identically as a small nub between the fetus's legs. Two small bumps, one on either side of the nub, soon emerge. If this fetus is a boy, the nub becomes a penis. The two bumps grow together to form a scrotum. The boy's developing testicles are still deep inside his body. Within them, primitive sperm are already developing. If this fetus is a girl, the nub becomes a clitoris. A vagina forms from the same tissue that forms a urethra in both sexes. Inside her tiny ovaries, all the eggs she will have for her entire lifetime are already forming.
I want you to focus in between the legs. Well, what do you think? What do we think?
A boy?
That's right. That's right. There's the picture right there.
My goodness gracious.
So we got our answer. You have a baby brother. What do you think about that?
The only growth spurts that I felt was last month, where I was small and all of a sudden I gained. Like in a week I gained 6 pounds and it just pushed right out. It was just really weird.
What happens is the top half of the uterus expands. And as it expands, or as it stretches and grows, it actually pushes all the organs that used to occupy that space, it pushes them up higher and higher into your upper abdomen.
By the 24th week, virtually all the mother's organs have been rearranged to make room for a new living being. But rather than discomfort, Nancy feels euphoric about the child inside her and the astounding changes of her own body.
You kind of feel sexy. It's a different feeling. It's a different feeling. And I don't think anyone understands. Either you feel good and you feel sexy and you kind of just, I guess, walk the talk. I don't know. Just a fabulous feeling.
The epic journey of the fetus continues. A growth spurt last month added almost 4 inches and 2 pounds. Now, at more than a foot long and 2.5 pounds, the fetus seems eager to explore its cozy womb. As if reacting to private thoughts, expressions wash over the face. The fingers and toes are fully formed now, complete with nails and fingerprints. And the entire fetus wears a furry coating. The hair, called lanugo, follows the patterns of the connective tissue, covering the fetus in swirls and spirals of down. The skin bears a waxy coating called vernix caseosa. It protects the fragile fetal skin from the amniotic fluid and infection, and will aid the fetus during the dramatic squeeze through the birth canal. Nancy is learning to cope with her new lack of grace. The size and weight of her belly requires new ways to perform her daily routine.
It was easy when I bent down, I could keep my balance. I'm not keeping that balance anymore. The stomach's a little heavier, so I'm not sure which way I'm gonna go.
Nancy isn't alone in her struggle for comfort. For the first time, she can feel with excitement her baby-to-be growing restless. As the life inside her starts to fidget and kick, Nancy's body responds. As Nancy's body prepares for labor, her uterus practices Braxton Hicks contractions, named for the doctor who first observed them. These irregular contractions are not as intense as those of true labor, but to Nancy, each breathless pang feels like the flutter of butterflies.
Braxton Hicks contractions are irregular contractions, very irregular, maybe 5 to 20 a day, and very low pressure as well. When we get up into maybe 24 to 28 weeks, most women will actually feel these contractions. Again, they're not painful, they're very low in pressure, they'll notice a tightening, and then they pass.
The fetus, too, is flexing its muscles. With room in the uterus to stretch and kick, poke and prod, it announces its existence to a waiting world.
The baby's starting to move, and you could feel him turn and kick. No one else feels it. Every time I have someone put their hands on my belly, it's quiet. So, but I feel it. Good night, moon. Good night, cow, jumping over the moon. Good night,
At 26 weeks, the womb is no longer a bubble of silence, for the growing fetus is starting to learn the sound of mother's voice.
Good night, kittens. Good night, mittens. Good night, clocks.
As it develops, the fetus will be able to respond to sounds both inside and outside mother's body.
Good night, mouse.
The fetus's world is getting noisier by the day. The structures of the fetal ear began to develop only 5 weeks into pregnancy. The ear is constructed from 3 components and in 3 stages. The outer structures began to take shape at 8 weeks. Pits on either side of the head formed the inner ear, responsible for processing sounds and maintaining balance. Not long after, the auditory canal and eardrum developed. Now, at nearly 26 weeks, the ear looks complete, and the 3 parts come together to enable hearing. Every day brings a symphony of new sounds to the fetus. The most prominent and reassuring come from mother. The beating of mom's heart and the blood coursing through her veins provide constant comfort. By now, every part of the fetus resembles the child that will emerge. The brain busily twists and folds miles of neural pathways into a rippling maze. In the process, it stitches together the core of the child's humanity as its countless connections set the stage for thought, self-awareness, and reason. Growth of the fetus creates challenges for the mother as her internal organs vie for space in cramped quarters. Nancy sometimes feels out of breath. But nature, which produced this temporary problem, also provides an eloquent solution. Pregnancy hormones are making Nancy's lungs more efficient, bringing in 40% more air, oxygenating more blood for her and her fetus. A major change is occurring in the fetal lungs, too. To prepare for life outside the womb, the cells lining the air sacs of the lungs begin to produce a substance called surfactant. It keeps the air sacs inflated, much like a soap bubble. As the baby gulps its first breath, moments after delivery, the surfactant will coat the ducts of the lungs to reduce the surface tension and keep them from collapsing. With lungs now full of surfactant, this nearly complete little human stands a chance of surviving the world outside, but it's far from ready to leave the safety of mom's womb.
His eyes are opening now. He's swallowing and making breath movements. He can hear us now. He knows my voice.
By the 7th month, the pangs and stirrings that were once so strange have now grown almost routine and familiar, but certainly no easier to bear. They're a constant reminder of the active life inside.
Well, believe it or not, even though some people don't think that I'm that big, I felt a huge growth spurt in my belly. And that was exhilarating, but exhausting, you know. Your back hurts a lot more. It's harder to breathe. He gets stuck up in my rib cage, and he'll have a foot or an arm or something up there. He pushes against the diaphragm, where it makes it hard to breathe.
Circulation suffers as the large uterus puts pressure on her veins. She feels occasional numbness in her hands and feet and cramping in her thighs and calves.
After about 20 weeks of pregnancy, we encourage pregnant women not to lay on their back anymore. At this point, the uterus is quite a bit heavier, and it actually lays on the blood vessels that run up your back, and they both become compressed. And some people will lose consciousness when pressure is applied to these vessels.
The huge physical toll can't compare to the euphoric anticipation of the birth to come.
That I'm having a baby, that's the neatest thing. That he's a person now, and not an alien, but that he's an actual being, and he's mine.
For Sherry, 9 months of waiting has whittled down to mere weeks as she prepares to bring her baby into the world. She feels elated but uncomfortably big. Her breasts are tender and enlarged with colostrum. She struggles to balance her enormous belly. She's never felt more expectant.
The last couple of weeks of pregnancy are an eternity. You pretty much have everything ready to go, and all you're doing is waiting. You can't turn around the way that you used to. Spaces that you normally fit through, you no longer fit through. Sleeping, switching from one side to the other, bending over is very difficult.
But Sherry won't be this big for much longer. Inside her uterus, the fetus prepares to leave its watery shelter. Turned head down in the womb, there's barely room now to stretch or kick. The fetus fully fills the womb. Every contraction squeezes in around it. Now this sensation is stronger. The upper part of the uterus shrinks and the lower expands, making the uterus longer and narrower. There's little to do but wait for the chemical signals that trigger labor. It can start at any moment. Kisa, too, is waiting for labor to begin and to meet her new baby at last.
I really do enjoy being pregnant. It's a great experience for me. But I do like the end process, and the end process is a beautiful baby. You're bundled up in your arms. I think just the fact of feeling a human being growing inside of you and not being able to see the baby's face or really to just hold them or snuggle with them or just to touch them. I think that's where I want to be at right now. I'm ready to hold and cuddle and go to that next experience.
For 9 months, Kisa's body has embarked on a biological odyssey geared to nurturing her developing child. Now, it's time to bring that child into the world.
Birth is triggered or is induced by the fetus, by the baby that's about to be born. And it's done so as the baby gets to a certain size or to a certain length in the uterus. It does so by releasing corticosteroids, a number of different hormones that cause the muscles of the uterus to contract. Once this occurs, there's a definite crosstalk between the embryo and the mother's uterus then beginning to contract. The crosstalk keeps happening, it happens faster.
Some of the signs that you'll know that you're in labor are regular contractions. The duration of each contraction is usually about 30 to 60 seconds. And if you notice, 1 hour goes by and you have 6 contractions, and then the next hour goes by and you have 10 contractions, and you're noticing actually a pattern, that's when you call the doctor just to let them know what's going on.
And you're right.
Kisa is in the first stage of labor. Over the last few days, her cervix has thinned and shortened. The sporadic practice contractions of the past are more regular now, only minutes apart.
There are 3 stages of labor. First stage of labor is from when the initial strong contractions start till when the cervix is dilated fully. It's the first stage of labor. Second stage of labor is actually the pushing stage, when the cervix is completely dilated till expulsion of the baby. That is stage 2. Stage 3 is actually from delivery of the baby to expulsion of the placenta. That's stage 3.
As Sherry goes into labor, she uses relaxation techniques to ease her discomfort. But her labor is long. The doctor has pierced her amniotic sac, but after the water is broken, her contractions intensify. And the pain becomes more difficult to bear. Kisa's labor is progressing quickly.
Okay, just breathe through it.
Each time the uterus contracts, the baby's world shrinks, and the placenta and umbilical cord compress. At the peak of each contraction, the baby's heart beats faster as the uterus pushes the baby further down the birth canal.
The contractions actually are a physical tightening of the entire uterus. All those uterus smooth muscles work together in concert, and they're actually squeezing that infant out.
That squeezing contributes to Kisa's pain, which signals that the baby is on its way. The first stage of labor is the longest, but the next steps are just as crucial. The cervix must become shorter and wider for the baby to pass through. The process of effacement squeezes the inch-long cervix to practically nothing. At the same time, the cervix grows wider or dilates from the width of a pinky finger to the width of a grapefruit. When it reaches 10 centimeters, Kisa is ready to push out her baby. The contracting and stretching muscles, coupled with the increasing pressure of the baby, produces the legendary pain of childbirth.
Here comes a contraction.
You just zoned out throughout the whole thing?
I just didn't feel them. Now here comes one right now.
To ease her pain, Kisa opts for an epidural. The anesthesia is administered directly into the spine and lightly numbs the pelvic region.
Feels a little uncomfortable. 1, 2, 3.
Can she sit up?
Yeah.
Come on up, Joshua. All right, baby.
As Sherry's labor progresses, her doctor becomes concerned that something might be wrong.
Yeah, we actually may need to flip you. Baby's heart rate's going down a little bit. I think there's a cord around somewhere, neck or arm or body, or the baby's just pressing against it. If it continues to go deeper and deeper with every contraction and we can't recover, then we'll talk about the next step.
Even before Kisa's cervix is fully dilated, the baby begins the descent down the birth canal. Tremendous pressure builds in the pelvis, but it's not time to push yet.
9. This is real 8 to 9 now. This is not going to be a whole lot longer now, I think.
To pass through the narrowest part of the pelvis, the baby, guided by the muscles of the birth canal, turns its head sideways to align with the pelvic inlet. The baby is a miracle of design. Though the head is its widest part, the plates of the skull compress by ½ an inch to ease its passage.
Go and do a push.
Okay, stop. You know what we're going to do? We're going to get everything prepared. Okay, I think by the time we do that, it'll be time to have your baby.
Awesome.
All right?
Before you come still.
The drop in the heart rate of Sherry's baby let the doctors know that the umbilical cord might prevent his normal descent down the birth canal. They decide that a C-section delivery is the safest approach for mother and child.
There you go.
Okay. Just great.
Good baby.
His head is out?
Yeah.
Biting my finger.
There's our cord. There's our cord. Okay, there you go. Okay, you around the shoulder. Okay.
Minutes later, a healthy baby is born. Not exactly as planned, but with joy, gratitude, and awe. And in that instant, an unbreakable bond is forged between parents and child.
Look, sweetie, right over here.
A bond that will last the rest of their lives.
All right.
Tell me when I can push, because I gotta push.
Kisa is now in the critical second stage of labor. In the face of intense pain, she musters all her concentration and willpower.
Just like the last time, sweetie.
As she contracts her abdominal muscles, the pressure inside the uterus increases, forcing the baby downward.
My goodness.
The vaginal opening gets larger as the baby approaches. Soon, the top of its head is visible.
Come on, sweetie. Keep pushing. Come on. Come on. Oh, take your time. You ready? You ready? Yes, sir. Oh, ready?
Easy does it. Beautiful.
Finally, the head is out.
Oh, there's a pain. It hurts so bad.
Oh, baby, she's almost here. All the way here, sweetheart.
Okay.
Got it. Easy does it.
Okay, and
Oh, my goodness.
And the baby emerges.
yes, mommy. Let me get that out of there. Yes, thank you.
Hundreds of millions of years of evolution collide in this single moment.
You are incredible.
See, it's like 2 or 3 pushes.
Hey, baby.
For 9 months, mother and child share an incredible transformation.
Oh, hey, baby girl.
Now, another journey is just beginning.
Mommy has been waiting for you for so long.